Well, some of you would say, I think I've been more shaped by a mentor. For some, it might have been a coach, someone who just took special interest in you at a special, vulnerable time in life, and it's made all the difference. Or others of you, it might have been a professor or a teacher, or maybe it was a boss that just took you under wing and said, I care about you, and I want to kind of help you to make your way in the business world. But for others of you, you think about what really has been the determining influence. It's not a person. You might think about someone who's got certain qualities, and you might want to label them as the one who's been the influence, but it really comes down to more of an issue of your own personal desire to prove yourself, to somehow make your way in life and to be able to say, I'm significant, to somehow prove somebody wrong as to how they have seen you. And that expresses itself in a lot of different ways. For some, it's ambition. You are just absolutely determined to climb to the top of the ladder in your profession. You want the world to see how truly significant you are. For others of you, you've allowed greed, you've allowed money, material things to really be the avenue that you've chosen. And you might resist that. I know that there is such a temptation for husbands and for fathers to rationalize and to say, I do everything that I do so that I can provide the best for my family. I want my family to have what I didn't have. I want to show them my love by all of the things that I'm able to provide for them. But you know what's sad about that? Your family sees it for the lie that it really is. And they know that what's going on in your heart is something very different than love for them. And that you are captured by your own greed, by your own ambition, by your own worldliness. Some of you men who are sitting here today, and I'm talking about folks in Sunday morning worship, you've allowed what should have been one of God's great gifts to you to shape your life in a way God never intended. And I'm talking about sex. I'm talking about what God offers to us that should be the means by which we are drawn into intimacy with our wives, that we will share that gift for all of our lives and only with our partner. But you've allowed lust to absolutely consume you. You've allowed your life to be drawn into sexual addiction, pornography, and things that are absolutely unspeakable. And many of you right now have just an absolute fear that the person sitting next to you might know what it is you do when you're by yourself. And there's such shame and such embarrassment. And you allow yourself to go places in your fantasy, and so many times you do the things you never thought you would possibly do because you've allowed sex to shape the person that you've become. David, as a young man, somehow had a different sense of who he was. I almost want to describe his faith as being intuitive, but I know that's not so. I think that would be to explain away who he was as a young man who somehow realized that God loved him, that God could be trusted with his life, that life was an adventure worth living and worth living inside the parameters that God had laid out for him. As a young man with limited responsibility, kind of the low man on the totem pole in his family, doing the jobs no one else wanted to do, he demonstrated faithfulness in that. He was willing to risk his life for sheep. When he went against a lion on one occasion and a bear on another occasion. And David demonstrated this kind of a full-blown man of God-sized faith when he shows up and there's this Philistine giant who has embarrassed and humiliated and emotionally defeated the entire army of King Saul. David steps out and says, what will be done for the man who takes away the reproach of Israel, who kills this uncircumcised Philistine? And he says, I'm ready to put my life on the line and face him because of the embarrassment he is bringing to the name of my God. Wow. As a young man, just a heart that is exploding to say, my God is able. I trust my God. And I want my life to be shaped by that kind of surrender, that kind of control by God's hand. Well, there's an issue of accountability that goes along with being the man of God. Conventional wisdom for years explained the sinking of the Titanic by the idea that there was this collision with an iceberg that brought about a catastrophic gash in the hull of the ship that resulted in its sinking. Every one of us in this room have seen some of the footage of recent discovery of the wreckage and the filming that they've done. And what they discovered was not a single catastrophic gash, but rather there was a long, thin cut that spanned 6 of the watertight compartments that resulted in this great ship sinking. I think there's a lesson there for us, guys. We may feel bulletproof. We may feel as though we're really not vulnerable to some of those extreme moral failures that we hear about and some of the things that are just such despicable acts that would clearly expose us as someone who has turned our back on God. But if we're not careful in the business of going about manly things, in the business and the pursuit of our careers and all of the other stuff, if we're not careful, it's the little neglect that allows the things to happen that before long begin to sink us as to our reputation, as to our character. David said, I've walked in my integrity. I've heard any number of definitions of integrity over the years. Probably one that I've heard as much as any is the idea integrity is this wholeness. It is this connectedness. That it means that we are a complete person, that we are in touch with ourselves, and there's no conflict within. There's integrity. But I like Stephen Covey's definitions. It's straightforward. He says it this way: integrity is the ability to make and keep promises and to honor your commitments. And David said, hello? All right. I am. I'm standing in front of the congregation right now. An 8-pound, 2-ounce baby granddaughter. 8-pound, 8-ounce baby granddaughter. All right. Oh, amen. All right. Love it. Thank you. Bye-bye. Born. I'll tell you what's neat about that. I could share it with my congregation, my church family, and I would like to have been there. But I did feel a responsibility to be here today with you. I care about the men of our fellowship. I want us to be men after God's own heart. I want us to live our lives in the kind of way that we're shaping our children. I want to be a godly grandfather. I want to love her with a pure love. I want to be able to affirm her. I want her to know that she's precious and that God has a plan for her life. Fellas, it's important what we do, isn't it? I know that life really does tug at us. There's so many demands that we have on us. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to relationships, doesn't it? It comes down to knowing that the people who are closest to